Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Community and Infrastructure Services Committee meeting. And we'll start with seeing if anyone has a disclosure of pecuniary interest this afternoon. It does not look like any. Thank you. Do we have a mover, please, for the consent items? Thank you, Mayor Barry. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Clancy. All those in favor? Okay, that is carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to our reports. Uncollectible miscellaneous receivable accounts write-off of December 2022. Is there a staff member speaking to this? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it is. Okay, we'll move on to discussion items then. Angela Mick, thank you.
Good afternoon. You? I think that. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Angela Mick, and I'm the Manager of Quality Management and Water Programs. Every year we present reports to the owner and council to summarize the drinking water system and to meet the regulatory requirements of the Safe Drinking Water Act. When we have a new term of council, we also bring forward the operational plan for re-endorsement and to inform council about their legislative responsibilities and to obtain commitment on the water system. These reports work together to ensure compliance and conformance of the drinking water system and to ensure that the drinking water is safe. The first report, the operational plan, consists of 21 elements, including infrastructure renewal, risk assessment, emergency response, and communication. Our standard operating procedures are high-level documents that describe the who, what, and when. The work instructions are more detailed and describe the how. There are over 300 documents, including forms. The Drinking Water Quality Management System, or DWQMS, is a living document and changes weekly. We have a regulatory requirement to continually improve the system through audits, staff feedback, debriefs, and suggestions. Council re-endorsement of the plan shows owner commitment to the drinking water system. We had our third-party audit this fall for the DWQMS, and they recommended recertification, meaning we are in conformance and we are doing what we say we do in our procedures. We completed a variety of water maintenance programs, including water main cleaning, valve turning, and hydrant operating. Water main replacement programs were mostly completed as planned. In 2023, we will continue with maintenance activities and the update of the Water Infrastructure Plan, or the WIP. There are no concerns with the drinking water system. Kitchener obtains treated water from the region of Waterloo and is responsible for the water distribution system. The third report, the annual water quality report, is a compliance report to confirm that we are taking enough samples, that we are reporting when outside the limits, and that we are completing the appropriate corrective actions to resolve the issues. Kitchener is audited annually by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks and is in compliance. The Safe Drinking Water Act imposes a standard of care on every person who, on behalf of the municipality, oversees the accredited operating authority of the system or exercises decision-making authority over the system. You may have already taken a virtual training session as per the email that was sent earlier this year. Taking Care of Your Drinking Water System, a guide for members of municipal councils, is a document that outlines council responsibilities regarding the water system. There is also a training session on March 21st. There are 3 things to remember as a councillor. It is your duty. There are legal consequences, including fines or imprisonment. Be informed. Your decisions have an impact on public health, and be vigilant. Don't take the drinking water safety for granted. These reports assist in being informed and vigilant about the drinking water system. Are there any questions on the reports?
Councillor Chapman.
Whoops. Thank you. It's not about the report specifically, but since the Strange Street treatment plant opened, have you had any concerns from residents about the coloring of the water, discoloring of the water in that area?
Through the chair, we probably have had areas around there, but very, very small amounts as compared to before they did the upgrades.
So it did seem to improve
It
somewhat.
did.
Okay, thank you.
That appears to be it for questions. Council, do we have any more questions? You? Oh, okay. Do we have a mover then? Thank you, Councillor Ioannidis. And thank you, Councillor Schneider. And thank you, Ms.
Thank
Smith.
you.
Okay, we will move on to item 6.1, inclusionary zoning for affordable housing status update. No. Okay, does anyone have any questions about item 6.1, inclusionary zoning for affordable housing? Okay, my apologies, everyone. We should have voted on each of those separately. So do I have Councillor Ioannidis, Councillor Schneider? You moved item 5.1, drinking water quality management standard and re-endorsement of the operational plan. All those in favor? Thank you. And I need a mover for drinking water quality management standard management review summary for 2022. Thank you, Councillor Owadani, and thank you, Councillor Chapman. All those in favor? Thank you. And a motion for the summary water report. I need a mover and a seconder for that. No, I don't. Okay. I'm sorry, just a mover? Thank you, Councillor Michaud. All those in favor? Thank you. Okay, then any questions for staff on the inclusionary zoning for affordable housing status update? Are there any questions with regards to the inclusionary zoning for affordable housing? Or sorry. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. Councillor Clancy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wondered if it warranted discussion to talk about the implications of Bill 23. I know there was a lot of, there were some limitations on the work being done because of the bill, and there's still so much uncertainty about the bill. I just wondered if staff could speak to that impact of Bill 23 on the work you're doing. Can I move? Do you want? Yeah.
Actually, we need a motion to have a discussion about that. So I am assuming that Councillor
Yeah,
Clancy
I would like to move.
Has moved that. All those in favor? Thank you. Go ahead.
And thank you, staff. It sounds like I really appreciated all the efforts made to make sure that many people from all walks of life as much as possible, could participate in this project. So, yeah. Do you want me to say the question again?
Thanks.
Okay, yeah, I know we're all trying to make sense about the impact of Bill 23, and this is one area where there, is some clear numbers and guidelines put ahead, but again, is that being, there's some parts of Bill 23 that's implemented now, and maybe just speak to how Bill 23 is impacting this project, if you don't mind.
Thank you through the chair. So Bill 23 and associated regulations we expect will impact inclusionary zoning. So alongside Bill 23 and a bunch of other regulations in the fall, regulatory changes were proposed to the regulation to the Planning Act that affects inclusionary zoning. It's proposing to do three key things. So one is limit what's called the set aside, or the maximum number of units within a development that can be required to be affordable housing, set the maximum term of affordability to 25 years, and pin the lowest price or rent that can be applied to inclusionary zoning to the average market rent or average resale price, 20% below those numbers. So those directions have been consulted on, but they're not in force and effect yet. So those are some changes that we expect to be coming soon. There's a little bit more detail to be fleshed out in those. They're not in force and effect yet. One thing that did change with Bill 23 was that we now know that inclusionary zoning units are exempt from paying development charges, parkland dedication, and community benefits charges.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, thank you. So I just have a question about the process. And I know it's not just Kitchener staff, it's also regional staff, and I presume Waterloo and et cetera are part of this process. Are you simply working within what came down from Bill 23, or are you trying to push the boundaries a bit?
Through the chair, so we do not know exactly what's going to come through the regulatory changes through Bill 23 and the proposed regulatory changes. Like I said, we haven't seen the text of those regulatory changes yet. We've seen some direction from the province. We are working, in assumption that there's a fairly high likelihood that that will be the law shortly, but we'll be nimble and flexible to deliver a recommended program and approach that both meets the requirements, legal requirements of the day, and also meets the needs of our community to deliver affordable housing and of the development community to be a viable partner in that approach. We also know that there's mandatory reporting at least every 2 years on the status of inclusionary zoning. We think that's probably a good time to check in with council on how the program's performing and review, any regulatory changes that may have happened in the intervening 2 years. Of course, we could move faster than that if the legislation changes faster than that.
And my second question has to do with whether it would be helpful for staff if council were to set those higher, percentages and the duration of affordable housing. And I'm not to say that everybody would agree with me, but is this something that we as a council would be able to assist staff in maybe, trying to get those numbers changed a bit and make them more valuable for what we're trying to do with inclusionary zoning?
Yeah, through the chair, council, excuse me, maybe I shouldn't turn my mic off. Through the chair, through your consideration of Bill 23 in December, there was some discussion around inclusionary zoning and the directions there. We told council at that time that we, in staff's early analysis, that the proposal from the province of 5%, 25-year maximum affordability and rents and prices pegged at 80% of the market were likely too low for some of the weak market areas, too high for some of the weak market areas, and maybe leaving some affordable units on the table in strong market areas. Overall, the financial analysis that we've commissioned through Enberry Lyons Consultants, and that's been updated recently, shows, that's within the realm of possibility. So I think it would be better for staff to provide a fulsome response on what we think the best recommended approach is to the various policy parameters in light of what the financial analysis supports, what's meeting community needs and objectives, and what the regulatory regime is in force at the time.
Thank you. And I think Mr. Raidman wants to comment on that as well.
Through the chair, so it was actually in relation to the first question. So I'll just refer council to page 83 of the previous reports authorities for DSD 20-150, which was the sensitivity analysis and the impact analysis, and that was a very broad range analysis that we looked at each of the station areas at the time, and so that's good background material for council, especially new members of council that want to understand more about the inclusionary zoning process, and that was completed in advance of Bill 23, which set the 5% target as well.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I went back and peeked actually at the housing needs assessment report from 2020. So I just I'm hoping to get a bit of clarity, because the report speaks to the financial model, but as we're aware, the housing supply issue in 2020, the data we had is very, very different from what we have today. It was actually off by almost 2/3, I would say. So in that report, it said 35,000 homes in Kitchener in 25 years, and now we know we need that in 10. So I'm just curious on how staff is integrating that into this report, and is that going to be impacting the recommendation with respect to how hard we want to push on affordable housing versus supply in general?
Yeah, through the chair, to you, Councillor Davey. Certainly that's an important piece of context. The housing needs assessment from 2020 spoke to overall what is our community's needs in terms of housing types that needed it, but also the range of affordability and tenures that our community needs. I would say we've learned more, and there's been nuance in terms of how do we plan for the folks that aren't yet in our community or aren't establishing new households, because the housing situation is so challenging. So broad strokes, we know there's significant need across low and moderate income parts of the income continuum among both renters and owners. I agree that some of the things that we've learned in the last 3 years since then have added some context and color to that, and it'll be involved in staff's recommendation. It'll influence staff's recommendation.
Yeah, okay, that's helpful. And again, it's not staff's fault, it's not council's fault, because at that time, as I recall, we were still being patted on the back for achieving the targets that we were given, only to find out later on that the data wasn't so great. But now we don't have that excuse going forward. So I just want to be clear on that, and I really hope that there's some really good data coming out of Statistics Canada with respect to our area in terms of migration out of the province of Ontario, people that were leaving. I'm really hoping that we're relooking that entire housing needs assessment from 2020, because there's certainly some valuable information in there, but there's some information that I think will be more of a detriment. So thank you.
Okay. Councillor Singh.
Hey, thank you. Just to carry on that, and of course tends to be some migration, but again, we are quite pressured with high targets of immigration or migration to this region as well. So kind of understanding that context where growth is still projected to maintain at the current levels, if not perhaps even higher. But at the same time, the development community has to be responsive to market trends in the sense of costing, and with inflation and staffing kind of complexities that exist in the marketplace right now. Are we seeing a lesser number of development applications coming forward? What's the kind of the growth projection on that, as opposed to in relation to, the intake of population too. So my concern is, of course, we can try to have all the targets in the world about housing if the development community isn't building it, but we still continue to have increased pressure on individuals wanting to move into our region. Will that continue to play a concerning cause for affordability as well in relation to supply? Like, and how will we address that?
Yeah, through the chair to you, Councillor Singh. So we hired Enbury Lyons Consultants back in 2020, you may recall, to help design or explore different policy options that try and strike that right balance. So help achieve our affordable housing objectives without unduly impacting development pro formas. We know that this needs to be done in partnership with the development community, because if we push too hard on these policies, there'll be no project and there'll be no housing, affordable or otherwise. So that continues to be top of mind for staff as we develop recommendations. We have been delivered an updated tool to help model those changing market realities. So much has happened since 2020 on the cost side of the equation, on the revenue side of the equation for developers, in the land market, interest rates. I mean, it couldn't be more different really than the data that we have from March 2020. So we're lucky to be armed with contemporary recommendations and an ability to move forward and be nimble with new market realities. With that very point in mind, is that this project or this policy needs to be carefully designed so as not to stifle development in major transit station areas, which serves several key objectives for the city around affordability, but also vibrancy, leveraging our investment in ion transit. So these are all factors that are very live in our recommendations to council, hopefully coming to you at the end of Q2.
That's really helpful, the fact that we are adjusting. And the question sounded a lot better in my head than the way I asked, and you got it anyways, and you answered it perfectly, so I appreciate that. The other question I had was related to, we have a lot of applications still coming forward through zone change. It may not be transferring into building permit process immediately after, but again, individuals are lining up. So there's no shortage of applications in that regard in the planning policy perspective. So anyone that gets approved for a zone change, do they have to then, meet the mandate for whatever the inclusionary zoning targets may be when they apply for building permit, or would it be only at the planning process?
Through the chair, the Planning Act sets out minimum provisions for transition. So complete applications for site plan and zoning bylaw, I believe, that are in and deemed complete prior to passing of inclusionary zoning are sheltered. Council will see recommendations from staff on a reasonable approach to transition. One of the key principles that we've seen so far in our recommendations from our land economist on how to make this program successful is minimize the disruption to the land market. So we know that gradual transition into this new policy regime will be important. But the Planning Act does set aside minimum transition provisions. We may elect to go further than that.
So that's a tool that's available from this council, so that we can capture many of the planning applications that this council has already approved.
Right. So
and those
anything
bylaws have been adapted. Can we ensure that, although they got approved for a certain amount of units on a site last year, but a better detail on inclusionary zoning comes out later this year, but depending on when they choose to build, we can still ensure that they are required to have some certain number of units that are affordable based on the new policy that will come forward. My concern is we're approving a lot.
Yeah.
And the policy seems to be delayed longer and longer. And I want to make sure everyone that's in the pipeline already are just as responsible of going forward, and new applicants as well. That's my question.
Yeah, through the chair. So the Planning Act sets out minimum transition provisions. So anybody that has a complete application in today is sheltered from providing those inclusionary zoning units.
And we can't change
Not
that.
much we can do about that. I, like you, Councillor Singh, am frustrated with the slow rollout of this inclusionary zoning. So you may recall we're beholden to protected major transit station areas being delineated in the regional official plan. The region adopted those changes in August. They're still awaiting minister's approval. We're in the same boat there as the City of Toronto. So they have their inclusionary zoning policies in force, ready to go, just waiting on the minister to approve their PMTSAs.
It's a shame. Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Stevenson, you wanted to add to this?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to confirm, this is going to take a partnership with the development industry, and certainly what we don't want to be doing is moving the goalposts halfway through. We work through our development services review closely with the industry, and we heard that if we make our expectations clear up front, a better ability to respond over time. So we'll certainly bring transition policies that are applicable, but inclusionary zoning is just one of many tools that we are going to be implementing. We are going to be in front of you probably every single PSIC meeting from now until the end of the year talking about a different housing tool or approach to increasing supply and also increasing a variety of different unit types. So we're going to be here on March 20th talking about some of the changes that we have made and are going to continue to make in order to meet the provincial pledge requirement of 35,000 units by 2031. So there's more, and this is one of many tools.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clancy.
I don't know if this subject or concern I have fits this discussion, so, move it aside if you wish. But, more and more I'm learning about a big number of units in my ward that are currently affordable, owned by private owners, and that loss of affordable units in the private sector. Does the inclusionary zoning tool that you're exploring consider that group of units?
Through you, Mr. Chair, so that's another body of work that we're doing. So as part of the direction that Council gave planning staff to look at all rental housing, we are looking at rent evictions as well as a rental replacement bylaw. So those are bodies of work that also have financial implications. So we are doing analysis on those. We intended to report back on the full body of work before the end of the year, and at the request of Council, we are going to report back piece by piece as we have more information. So you'll continue to hear updates about all of the tools and policy changes and potential opportunities we have through that rental housing work. So that's ongoing. They're all related in terms of bringing on housing and different forms of housing, but they're all separate tools, and we'll make sure that Council is aware of all the tools and opportunities available.
And would that kind of housing be considered, you talked about your financial modeling, like are you using those same modeling tools for that group of housing supply?
So we know that we have to understand the finances of something like a rental replacement bylaw, and so we have to understand that more. So we're going to be engaging in doing financial analysis. We haven't started that work yet, but it's something that we know we need to understand.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. So when it comes to affordability, if I'm not mistaken, in the inclusionary zoning legislation that came in Bill 23, it refers to really 80% of market value. Is that correct? Like attainable, I think, is the word we use these days.
Through the chair, so the proposed regulatory directions speak about the lowest that a municipality can require through inclusionary zoning being 80% of average market rent or 80% of average resale. So we hope to see more details around what that means, but that's the proposed regulatory direction.
Okay. So, and can we, like, what in the inclusionary zoning clause or in the Planning Act, is there anything that holds developers to this? Like, so for example, it was brought to my attention that a development, and it doesn't matter where it was, when they applied and they got approval to build, that they were going to build affordable housing, and more than just 80% of market value. Now, today, those units are advertised at $1,900 for a one-bedroom. So how do we follow up, or do we have tools or ways to follow up with developers to show that you committed to this and now you're doing this sort of thing? Like, how does that work? or does it?
Yeah, through the chair, inclusionary zoning is a unique tool in that we, as municipalities, are enabled to register agreements on title guaranteeing ongoing affordability. That's not a tool that we have at our disposal outside of inclusionary zoning. So that's the short answer. The somewhat longer answer is we understand that ongoing monitoring enforcement of these agreements is going to be an administrative lift. And the region of Waterloo has expressed some interest in taking a leadership role to help all three municipalities in that regard. No commitments yet, but we understand that there is going to be a lift there administratively, but we're fairly confident that we can develop agreements that make this happen.
Okay. The other question is kind of bouncing off a bit of what Councillor Clancy was saying about the 25%. You responded with regard to rentals, but recently in the paper there was an article that talked about condos are 25% owner occupied. So that means 75% of the condos are not occupied by owners. Is there any thought process, maybe in inclusionary zoning or in other planning ways that we can modify that? And because clearly when it's not owner occupied, rents, most of those are then rented out, right? They all are rented out. So that pushes rents higher and higher and higher. What tools do we have, possibly through inclusionary zoning, that would be able to put some controls in place?
Through the chair, we can't control the tenure of any unit, be it inclusionary zoning unit or otherwise, to my understanding. But we are looking through inclusionary zoning to provide pathways to affordability for sort of three big buckets of tenure. So one would be affordable rental units in a purpose-built rental building. One would be affordable ownership units in a condo building, and a third would be affordable rental units in a condo building. So that really captures that 75% number that you're talking about. In terms of other tools to require owner occupancy in condominiums, I'm not aware of a tool like that today.
Okay, that's helpful. So my last question, may I, or is, yeah. It's regarding vacancy rate, because, you know, we talk about needs and, you know, I understand that the vacancy rates are only measurable for buildings up to 8 stories. Is that correct? And it's based on water consumption. Is there anything that the city can do to look at, you know, those buildings above 8 stories to figure out what our actual vacancy rate is? This came to us in a report a while ago about vacancy rates, and if I'm remembering properly, it had to do with water consumption, and it was only measured in buildings up to 8 stories.
All right, I believe, Garrett, yeah?
Yes, through you, Chair. So we look at vacancy rates. We have a couple of different sources of information for it. One is Stats Canada, and we know, and there's different variations, and I'm not going to be able to pull it up fast enough on our Stats Canada profile, but we're fairly confident in the various measurements that we know that our vacancy rate is quite low. In terms of the review for the water, I don't remember the 8-story limit, and maybe one of my colleagues will remember the particulars around that, but that was a method that we used to determine which units were occupied, and that confirmed our assumptions and the information we have available to us at StatsCan that our vacancy rate is quite low. I don't remember the nuance about an 8-story building.
Okay, Mr. Reedman?
Through the chair, and so that reference was to the vacant home tax, and so we know that the StatsCan information is the most reliable information. It just comes out in 5-year cycles, and so we were looking at more immediate information for part of that report, and so getting annualized information is a lot more challenging, but as accurate as StatsCan information, and so that was where the water consumption component came in.
And the Stats Canada numbers, are they nationwide, or are they by, like, can we get, if you could send us any information on that, like, is it specific to the region, to the city, or is it a Canada-wide assessment? And those are all my questions. Thanks.
Through the chair, Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation, CMHC, produces rental market reports annually. The October data just came out a couple of weeks ago, and it reports at a region level, at a city level, and breaks the city of Kitchener, I think, into 3 or 4 smaller geographic zones. So that's data. We have the October 2022 vacancy available for what's called the primary rental market, as well as in Waterloo region. I believe we have it broken down for rented condominium apartments as well. So I can help you find that data if you're interested.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. I just have a question with regards to the tools that you're going to bring forward for us to consider going forward for development. I read recently that a lot of the units that are being built are, of course, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom. There's very few units or less units for families, and there's a concern, was a concern in this article, that families are going to start moving out of the city because there's nowhere for them to afford to live, which in turn we could possibly lose good talent in the city and the region. So will there be any tools that you'll be able to do, and maybe through zoning, that can limit the amount of units, single units, like single bedroom units? They'd have to put bigger units in for small families. Would that be something that you'll consider?
So through you, Mr. Chair, that's, I wasn't kidding when I said we're going to talk housing all year. We're going to be bringing the preliminary assessment work that we've done for the missing middle study, and part of that, we've asked a consultant to specifically look at the barriers that the industry faces for larger 3-bedroom units, as well as what incentives and potential opportunities there may be. So it's something that we're currently reviewing, and we'll be bringing that back as part of that missing middle study.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Singh.
Yeah, I'll try to help guide the answer to that through some of my questions, if you can. In a high-rise, do you know what the cost for building cost would be in relation to land and construction? And of course, all the permits as well. Per square footage. Offhand, average would be fine.
High 60s, mid 60% through the chair. We'll have more information coming on that through the enabling missing middle and affordable housing report.
So would it be off in relation to what we can understand, right? Put some context to in a dollar sense, right? Per square footage, it's upwards to $750 to $700 a square foot in a high-rise. That's what the new costs are.
I can tell you through the chair that Altus released a new cost guide about 3 or 4 weeks ago. That number is contained in there, and I can provide it for you.
Do you know offhand?
No.
Okay, all right. Does it cost considerably more in a high-rise to build related to a mid-rise and then a low-rise?
Through the chair, yes. Concrete construction is certainly more expensive than stick-built.
And because those costs are significantly different, I'm assuming low-rise is the cheapest, right?
Through the chair, yes. Stick-built construction is certainly cheaper per square foot than high-rise concrete construction.
And what tends to be the biggest barrier when we would like to see, but tends not be what we see around this chamber, of more applications that are, you know, the missing middle, but more related to stacked towns, or even the triplexes or the fiveplexes. Back in the day, you know, the type of units that were built 30, 40 years ago, we're used to see 3-bedroom and 2-bedroom quite consistently, as opposed to the commonality of 1-bedroom now. What tends to be the biggest barrier in those type of proposals?
Through the chair, my advice might be interesting, but we've paid a consultant to help us provide a really fulsome answer to that, and I don't want to push off your question, but we're really going to have much more nuanced answers to those questions coming up in April is the target for council. So if I could indulge your patience on that one, I think we could have a lot more fulsome conversation rather than my off the cuff.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Just if I can quickly make a comment, would you allow it? So where I was trying to get to is, the problem is, we get the biggest pushback when we have an application for stacked towns in existing neighborhood. And stacked towns tend to be the easiest and the quickest way that we can build 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom plus units. But that's where we get the most resistance. And that's where it's the cheapest to build as well. It's tough to force it in somewhere that's just not possible for the market to create and build, and not let go of the opportunities that exist citywide where we can really fasten the pace of the development when it comes to the 3-bedroom units that we want, potentially in a more denser building opportunities. Thank you. Just my perspective.
Thank you. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Schneider, and thanks, Councillor Singh, for those succinct comments. I feel like I've been saying that for a long time around here, and just, I'm not saying it's our staff or anything, I just think people need to realize that it's not easy to build homes, and trying to force regulations on our community partners who are the development world to build. So anyways, I guess my question is, and it's sort of along the lines of, what are we doing to ask the federal government and ask the province on a high level? Because in my opinion, this inclusionary zoning is a complete waste of time. It's not going to solve anything. So why are we not concentrating all our efforts in saying, we need money and we need money now?
Mayor Ruvanovic.
Yeah, I think that's probably more of a political question than a staff expertise question. And quite frankly, I think it's fair to say that, you know, as municipalities, that has certainly been a significant ask of both the federal and provincial government for some time. The National Housing Strategy that was developed a few years ago was really the start of that in terms of laying a framework under, and that was something that we advocated for many years. And certainly at the federal level, we've been seeing, you know, significant investments both through the Rapid Housing Initiative and what's been constructed locally, and there's a phase 3 to that, and part of this year's budget ask is actually to make the RHI fund a permanent fund. And in addition to that, as part of the last federal budget, the Housing Accelerator Fund was announced. While details of that we're hearing going to happen soon, that's really going to be focused more around process improvements to assist with construction going forward, and as opposed to new housing construction in and of itself. So it's really a number of things that need to happen. And then on the provincial end, it's really the operating dollars for the supportive housing that are key. I mean, you can build all the supportive housing you want, but the individuals moving into that housing won't be successful in terms of outcomes if they don't have the wraparound supports that are necessary. And so that's something that we continue to advocate for. So I would tell you, Councillor Ioannidis, it's been a priority both at FCM, at AMO, at BCMC, and at OBCM.
Okay. Can we not send a message in this council and say, basically, we reject this idea of inclusionary zoning? Because, to be honest, it's really not going to do anything. And I know all the funding that we see coming from the feds and all that stuff. There's condition after condition after condition. So for every dollar you get from the feds, you basically blow it to giving it to somebody else. You spend $75 to get $25. So I feel like this is just a thing that we're just sitting around here and talking, and you know, the reality is this is not doing anything. And I know, Mayor, and I know you've done really hard and worked hard, and it's no criticism on what you've done. And I just feel like we need the money today. And it's just putting in any of these policies or anything like that is just for show. That's just my opinion.
So I think maybe I'm not going to get into the debate, but I would suggest, Councillor Ioannidis, that in fact it was this council that has, or the previous council, that has been on record many times for looking for inclusionary zoning and wanting it. And so, in fact, there's a change of heart. That's something to have a broader conversation on, but there's obviously been a lot of work that's gone into this and gone into it collaboratively with our colleagues from the other municipalities. So, at this point, I would not be supportive of abandoning the notion of inclusionary zoning.
Well, Elise, thanks for indulging me. Again, I'm not criticizing any of the efforts that anyone's doing here. I think we're working in our framework, what we need to do, but the reality is it's not working. And I know I'm supportive of inclusionary zoning. Let's do it. I was supportive of it 3-4 years ago, but that time was 3-4 years ago. Time's passed.
Thank you, Councillor Ioannidis. Councillor Donnell.
Thank you, Councillor Schneider and Councillor Ioannidis. I share your frustration with you. Welcome to the world of healthcare. It's all about optics. I have a quick question. Stick build. What is stick build?
Through the chair, I apologize for that bit of jargon. So that's construction typically made with framed lumber. So the way that you might build a single detached house, a low-rise apartment, typically up to 3 stories. In concrete construction or sort of newer techniques like mass timber are a different method of technology, different trades involved, generally taller buildings, different section of the building code, et cetera.
Thank you.
Councillor Chapman again.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up a bit on what Councillor Ioannidis is saying. And I just want to remind you that inclusionary zoning is one of the only tools that the lower tier government has to try and get some attempt at having affordable housing. Do I think that the guidelines that the province has set out are adequate? Of course not. I think they're not at all adequate, and that's really problematic. But regardless, like I said, it's one of the only tools that we as a lower tier government have to advance the cause. So I would not support ditching it, personally.
Okay, that appears to have be the questions there. I just have a few. In with this inclusionary zoning and making sure people who need affordable housing will get it. Will there be any records kept? Like, let's just say, for example, somebody in 2023 is in need of affordable housing and it's provided for them. But then over the years, situations change and their situation may improve. They may take on a partner and have more income, but still living in that affordable unit. What sort of measures do we have to make sure that all affordable units are being used by people who are truly in need?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're exploring that very same question. We're getting some legal advice on that matter. I don't have the answer for you yet. It will be a challenge.
Yeah, okay. Another question deals with our stock of 3-bedroom housing. I know that in our area here, we do have a good number of 3-bedroom houses, except they're being used by people who aren't fully using the 3 and 4 bedrooms. And I know there's nothing we can do about that, but I think it's a discussion to have to say, there may be potential as people move and get out of housing that these 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom units will come into play. So just would love to hear some comment on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So certainly 3-bedroom units is something that is a fascinating subject because we know that, so we have I have all right in front of me because I want to be able to answer this accurately for you. So we have 99,805 units in Kitchener. 61% of those, so 61% of all units within the city are 3 bedrooms or more. But our households don't match that. So if we look at 58% of our households, so almost about the same number, they're 1 and 2 bedroom, or 1 and 2 person households. So 26% of our households are 1 person and 32 are 2 people. And if we know that there's an increased demand for 3-bedroom units, that means that we have a large segment of our population that are living in units that are larger than they specifically need, and then it's creating a demand because people are not flowing through the housing continuum exactly at a rate that the demand and the need is supplied. So when we look at the 3-bedroom units, we often, and Councillor Singh is correct, that our suburban and central neighborhood stacked product, stacked townhouses, wood construction, we see a lot of 2 and 3-bedroom units. The cost to deliver those make it favorable for larger families to locate within that product. The cost for a 3-bedroom unit in a high-rise with land costs and other aspects that go into a high-rise construction make that same square footage less affordable for a family. And therefore, they tend to be drawn to ground-oriented housing like stacked townhouses. So we are seeing 3-bedroom units being created. We're not seeing them necessarily within our high-rises downtown. But I guess it's also important to know that only 15% of our buildings in Kitchener are 5 stories or more. So even though this council has had many difficult tower proposals in front of you over the past several years, that is a more recent trend. Most of our housing in Kitchener, 85% of it is less than 5 stories. So majority of our homes in Kitchener are 3 bedrooms or more and ground-oriented and less than 5 stories. It's only been the recent change to the market that we're starting to see 1 and 2 bedroom units, which is marketed to 61% of our population, which are 1 and 2 person households.
Okay, this is great information. It'd be really, I think, helpful if we could have some infographics created that, express what you just expressed. The other question I have is ongoing records. Like when we have infill projects done, we sometimes there are dwellings removed, but then dwellings replace that. Is there any information available, or could that be made available for, when we're removing dwellings, the percentage of dwellings that have been added to our supply?
Yes, we can certainly look at that. As part of our rental replacement bylaw research, we're going back to see exactly how many rental units were removed in order to create new rental units or new housing units. What we do know is that a large majority of our recent development applications in the last 5 to 8 years have been underutilized properties that did not have a residential use on them. If you think about some of the tower sites downtown, they were not all formerly low-rise rentals. Some of them were vacant parking lots, gas stations, commercial businesses that had been closed for some time. I know that this council has had to consider applications where rental units were being removed for additional housing. There is a record article that looked at the city of Waterloo replaces 17 units for every 1 unit that's demolished. I ran the numbers for Kitchener, and since 2017, our average is 47 new units for every single unit demolished.
Wow.
So we are seeing an increase of housing supply. So along with inclusionary zoning, along with our missing middle, along with all of these little tools, and increasing supply, these are all tools that have to work together to start to respond to the housing crisis.
Okay, yeah, these are great stories, and if we could somehow encapsulate that and have that available to the public, I think that would be fantastic. That's really encouraging to hear. 47 units for every one that we lost. Wow, that's incredible. I don't see any more questions in the queue. Oh, Councillor Clancy.
I just wanted to clarify, maybe like if we're doing an infographic, we could include affordability as a component. I think, my concern is that one affordable unit or however many affordable units are lost and how many not affordable units are created. So, just to, I always want to differentiate that supply and demand argument to consider the different price points.
Fine, okay. I think that's all we have, so motion to adjourn. Councillor Initis, Councillor Deneau, all in favor? All right. This concludes our Community Infrastructure Services meeting.